and welcome to the show. I'm Chris James, and if you're wondering what happened to the music, well, my soundboard has decided it does not want to communicate with the new computer my wife bought me, so we'll just have to do without the music. This show is being brought to you by the Organic Man Coffee Trike, 4501 McPherson. Best coffee on the planet. So, if you're in Laredo, you can get coffee there. If you're not in Laredo, you can go to organicmancoffeetrike.shop. And now, here we go with the Bag Company Unhappy Halloween, episode 4. She got back behind the wheel on her way home. I might make it before dark. Pam was halfway home when her phone rang. It was Madame Dingus. Pam stopped in front of the mall. Madame Dingus, what can I do for you today? Oh, please, call me Angie. The madam was still acting way too friendly. I just found something in the cards that I thought I should pass on to you. She lowered her voice. But not over the phone. You never know who might be listening. Pam stopped out front of the madam's house and went up to ring the doorbell. The door swung open before she could push the button. Pamela, dear, do come in. It's a trap, her inner voice said. Thank you. So, what is it you wanted to tell me? I've been reading that book Mr. Techno gave me, and I think I'm getting somewhere. Madame Dingus had her tarot cards sitting at the dining room table. Please have a seat. I want to show you this. Pam took a seat and waited while Angie shuffled the cards and then asked Pam to ask the cards a question. Pam had to think for a bit. What is that monster that tried to eat you supposed to be? Madame Dingus split the deck in two, sort of halves, and then she picked one card and looked at it. Well, this is interesting. She shoved the card back into the deck. Let's try it again. Madame Dingus picked up the next card. Oh, come on. How many of these things are there? As she accidentally dropped the card on the floor. Let's see. I have here. She lifted the next card. Nope, she dropped it as well. Pam looked at the cards on the floor. Madam, what is that card you keep dropping? Oh, it's just that pesky death card thingy. Madame Dingus looked at the faces on the remaining cards, and then she shuffled them as if trying to start a fire. Much better. I'll just lift the first card, and no way this is happening. She had flipped the skeleton over once more. Just go ahead and see what the next card is. Pam thought this just maybe there could be some kind of an explanation that didn't involve her dying. The court jester, just like the last time. Madame Dingus had a weird look on her face. So I'm going on a trip and I'll change or I'll die at the end of it? Pam didn't feel nearly as relaxed as she was trying to appear. I'm so sorry. It's as if these things have a mind of their own. Madame Dingus quickly looked through the cards, trying to see why the 13th card kept reappearing. Maybe I need a new deck. This might be worn out or broken or something. She put the cards back in the deck and set it on the chair next to her. So let's not focus on this death thing and think more about change. Change is good, right? Madame Dingus looked at Pam and smiled. What I wanted to tell you was, a few minutes before I called you, I had a vision of sorts, like a voice inside my head, only with pictures. I was told to tell you to not go near old beat up campers full of evil elves. Really? Pam was amazed by this information. Yes, and that to stay away from the mall. One or the other. Pam told Angie about yesterday's big adventure. She tried to sound like the whole thing was more like she was more in control of the whole thing than she had actually been. Wow, I wonder if maybe I'm becoming psychic or something. I guess maybe the cards are just cold or slow or something. Maybe I can find somebody to give them a tune up. Pam was able to get home before dinner and tried to wade through all of her homework. Chapter 7. Death. Pam was driving to school when she spotted a suspicious vehicle behind her. It was suspicious because the driver seemed to fill the windshield with its bulk. True, it was a Volkswagen Bug, but still the driver must have been huge, kind of like Hortense, only without all that satin. The Bug was lime green and it looked fairly new. The moonroof was open and some kind of a staff was sticking up into the air. Pam tried to see from the rear view mirror, but it was just too small. She switched to staring at the side mirror, but had to look to the front so she didn't accidentally slam into someone. As Pam drove, the Volkswagen followed her. As she made a left hand turn, the Bug did the same. The light was red. Pam came to a stop, and then she turned her head and looked behind her. The Volkswagen had stopped right behind her pickup. The driver sat and stared at Pam, staring at him. The driver was dressed in all black. A hood hung down the sides of his head. The face was white, too white, kind of like a skull. That actually was a skull. Once the vehicle had stopped, the staff sticking through the moonroof had turned so Pam could see it wasn't a staff, it was a scythe. The blade was long and curved with a "here comes death" look to it. Pam could only sit and stare at this image from her nightmares, sitting in traffic behind her. Somebody began to honk. It was Death. A Death is honking at me. Pam could just envision this thing jumping from its conveyance, with its robes billowing out around it. It would move as if driven by the wind. No sign of any feet below the hem of its cloak. The huge scythe would swing through the air, taking Pam's head off with one clean swipe. Am I going to spend the rest of eternity wandering the earth, holding my head in my arms? Pam thought about Rumpus Ganglia, the headless biker. Death shook his fist at Pam. He then pulled around her and drove through the intersection. As he went by, he glowered at her. Pam had to wait for the light to turn green once more, and then she got going, trying to drive without looking for Death, who might come swooping down on her at any time. Pam found her usual spot to park and stopped outside into the street. As she was about to walk across the avenue, who did she see? It was Death walking along the sidewalk en route to intersect with Pam before she could reach the safety of the school. Pam considered running back to her pickup and driving away as fast as the posted speed limit would allow. Even when life hangs in the balance, it was no excuse for breaking the law. The sound of excessive horsepower filled the air. Pam looked to her right and saw Rumpus, the headless motorcyclist, coming her way. Talk about the cavalry arriving at the last second. Rumpus, am I glad to see you? Pam would have hugged him if not for being a ghost, and she didn't much care for the sensation of her arms slipping halfway through anyone. What's up, Chickie? Rumpus was in an unusually good mood today. He had found a cheerleader's baton and shoved it down the back of his jacket. He then used some duct tape to secure his head in place. And now, as long as he didn't have to look left or right, he was a happy camper without going camping. It's him, Death. He's trying to take me. Pam pointed to the apparition still coming her way. Rumpus had to swivel his body around so he could look. What, that poser? That's just some guy dressed up for Halloween. Rumpus leaned in close. You want me to take him out anyway? Pam looked closer at the image of Death, who was now looking at Pam as if she were nuts. To him, some nut job was leaning to her side in the middle of the street, pointing at him and talking about something that only she could see. She was giving the guy a complex. Oh, no, I thought he was coming for me. No, no, don't kill him, okay? Pam ran to get to class before the bell rang. As she was entering the building, Death was in the process of trying to get a hold of the door handles with his fake claw hands. Pam, always one to be helpful, even to Death, stepped up next to him. Allow me. She pulled the door open. Death opened his cloak so he could look at her. His real head was about the same level as hers. Oh, you're that weird chick who thinks she sees dead people. I've heard of you. He had to duck to get his head in under the door. Well, look in a mirror sometime. Pam ran for her first class. A lot of kids were dressed up for Halloween, even though it was still 4 days away. They had parties to go to or competitions to attend. Pam had yet to decide what she was going to be for Halloween. Not that she was going trick or treating, as she considered herself too old and grown up for that. Sarah wanted to go door to door candy collecting and had asked Pam to join her. Pam needed a cool costume to not go trick or treating, just accompany somebody who was. Mrs. Grampus looked at the assembled mix of monsters and retro high schoolers. What was I thinking when I decided to be a teacher? She mumbled under her breath. Pam did her best to look innocent of any crime which caused Mrs. Grampus to stare at her harder, trying to perceive what dastardly deed this young troublemaker had just performed. With 75 possible delinquents to survey, she scanned the crowd for other offenders, but her eyes always came back to that bogus girl. Right. Mr. Hammerhead wants to know who it is that has been leaving muddy footprints on the walls and the ceiling of the campus. She looked for guilty faces among the crowd. There's a reward for answers, a guaranteed B in all your classes. This got everybody's attention. The original offer had been an A, but seeing as the ones who would know about this kind of thing were probably struggling just to get a C, an A was too extreme of a proposal. There's a box next to the cafeteria entrance where you can drop your information. Mrs. Grampus thought bribery was not the way to go. Threaten them all with expulsion would be a better course of action, and that would weed out some of the slackers as well. She was about to read the next announcement. There was a loud crash from the hallway, followed by screams and the sounds of running feet. Mrs. Grampus yanked the door open and yelled, "No running in the hallway unless you're being pursued by a man with a chainsaw." The kids just kept running. They had all come out of the classroom right across the hall from Mrs. Grampus's room. Storming across the corridor, she stepped through the opening and into Pandalirium. Desks were everywhere, pushed aside to allow a hasty exit. Even the teacher had joined the mass flight. Standing in the middle of the room was a 6 foot tall creature from somebody's bad dreams. It was the thing from the shopping mall, only there's no reason to describe it again, only it was bigger. It belched as it turned for the door. A girl's loafer popped from its mouth. It began to run. Mrs. Grampus would have been knocked from her feet had it not been for Pam. Pam grabbed her teacher and pulled her to the side as the monster came through the door and headed for the exit. What? How? Who? Miss Grampus slid to the floor unconscious. Pam took off running after the monster. This felt so unnatural to her, but then this was becoming a bit of a habit. The monster hit the exit and was out the door. Pam was right behind it before the door could even close. The monster turned and began running towards the football field running track. Pam was glad she'd picked up some new shoes. She just wished she had them on instead of these slick soled loafers. The sidewalk was punishing her feet. She didn't much want to catch this thing, but she wanted to see where it was going. The sound of sirens reached Pam's ears, but they all seemed to stop at the school. I guess they didn't know the monsters already left. Pam was getting good at running. She hardly had to catch her breath at all. The fence around the football field was 4 feet high. The monster cleared it without a hiccup. Pam had to put her hands on the top rail and boost herself up and over. As she cleared the fence, she began to run, only to be yanked off her feet. Her dress had caught on the top of the fence. She watched as the monster took off across the football field en route for the next fence. Man, I hope I didn't tear anything. She unhooked the fabric from the fence and eyeballed a big tear. Darn it! She looked to be sure nobody was standing around that might have seen her predicament. She then got busy running for the monster. As it was about to jump, the thing came to an abrupt halt. It turned towards Pam as she got close. Several of its eyes began to water, and it made strange faces. Well, strange for a hideous monster. The mouth opened wide, which was halfway around its head or its body. All those teeth looked dangerous. Its body shook. It wobbled as it tried to stay upright. Pam stopped her advance and took a cautious sidestep to get out of the line of sight. Several of the eyes swiveled to stay on her. With a sudden, violent heave, it expelled a body from its mouth. Pam jumped back to avoid being hit by this flying student and to avoid any monster saliva. Now empty, the monster jumped the fence and ran away into the distance. Pam looked at the body laying at her feet. It was dressed just like her, only more slimy and disgusting looking. She hoped this corpse was still alive. If it wasn't, it wasn't a corpse. Pam tried to touch it without making contact with the oozing mass of mess. The body moved. Oh, good, you're alive. I hope you. I hate finding I hate finding dead bodies. As she tried to see if the airways open. How do you do this without touching? Pam bit the bullet and placed a hand on each shoulder. The body made weird whimpering sounds. I'll call you an ambulance. Pam realized she didn't have her cell phone. It was in her book bag back under her desk at the school. A passing police car had spotted the two schoolgirls in the football field. When Pam yelled to send an ambulance, the officer did. Pam wasn't going to go to the hospital with Jackie. It had taken a while to recognize her. All that monster saliva had glued her hair to her face, making an ID nearly impossible. In an effort to clear the airway, Pam had come to the conclusion that this was the same girl who insulted and belittled her any time the two were within earshot. As the ambulance crew grabbed Jackie and dumped her onto the stretcher, as she had grabbed Pam's hand, and now she wouldn't let go. The paramedics tried to pry her fingers loose, but gave up and told Pam to just come along to the hospital. So here she was, bouncing around in the back of an ambulance on the way to the emergency room. Can you tell me how she got these injuries? The paramedic had his report out, writing up his notes. She was swallowed by a huge monster and then regurgitated into the dirt. Pam had said it before considering how this might sound. The medic just wrote this down. Is she your sister? No, we're not related at all. Next of kin sister named Pam, he wrote on the report. At the ER, the staff moved Jackie to a hospital stretcher and then left. Pam was still stuck, literally, by monster saliva to her hand. Pam tried to pull her fingers loose. Then she tried to pull her hand away. When the bed was being drug across the floor, Pam gave up, looking for a chair to sit in. The chair was on the other side of the room. She tried to reach it, but her foot was 2 feet short of hooking the armrest. With no option coming her way, Pam sat on the floor and tried to not feel too weird. You two must be close. Sisters? This from some guy in a hospital outfit. No, just the same school. Pam got to her feet so she wouldn't look like a floor decoration. The doctor did all the doctor things. He looked in Jackie's eyes and up her nose and down her throat. He listened to her lungs. This is odd. Your friend looks just like some guy they'd brought in last week. Not yesterday. Uh, this is odd. Your friend looks just like some guy they brought in just yesterday. The doctor scratched his head. Some kind of a weird virus, maybe. Is there some way you can get her to let go of my hand? Pam's fingered Pam figured she should have been missed by Mrs. Goblin by now, if not Mr. Bonnethead. Hmm, maybe some muscle relaxants. I'll order some blood tests, and if she's clean, I'll order some meds. And with that, he was gone. Pam slumped back down onto the floor. Pam washed her hands again, the feeling of monster saliva still on her mind. Jackie was acting kind of strange. I just wanted to thank you for saving my life, she moaned and groaned. I didn't save your life. I just kind of. No, you saved me. You're such a hero. I'm going to tell all my friends about what a great person you are. Her hair was glued to the pillow. If there's anything you want, just ask. I'll get my mom to buy you anything. She thought for a second. No, I'll get a job. 2 jobs. I have so much to make up for. She made a sobbing sound. This got Pam to thinking about Madame Dingus, suddenly acting as if Pam were her favorite person on earth. There's something I need to do, she ambled towards the door. Will you be okay if I slip out for a bit? Please say you'll come back. Oh, yes, I'll be. Pam was out the door and down the corridor. At the front desk, Pam asked for Martin Slamchunks. Is he still here? The volunteer at the desk checked her computer. Yes, he is. He's in room 4210. That'll be on the 6th floor. Pam found room 4210 once she got back down from the 6th floor. The door was partially open. Knocking, Pam stuck her head in, not knowing what she might find. It looked like the guy from the mall, only without the look of horror on his face or the little kid in his hands. He was sitting in a dark room. A pillow was held over his face. Pam was certain that wasn't him making those sobbing sounds. Mr. Slamchunks, sir, I was wondering if you could answer some questions. Pam slipped into a chair and tried to ignore the wet streaks on his face. I'm such a rotten person. I should be drug out in the street and shot like a rabid dog. Can you tell me what that thing was that ate you? Pam looked for something to make notes on. It was too good of a punishment for me. I should be drugged naked down a gravel road. Did you get any indication as to what that thing might have been? But Pam was now looking for something to write with. He flung the pillow away with a look of dread on his face. That little girl, is she okay? Did she survive, or am I more guilty than I think? That kid from the mall? Pam desperately tried to remember what she had read. She's okay, I think. Something to do with a skin irritation, but mostly she's good. Martin pulled back the sheet and stumbled from the bed. Pam quickly looked out the window, but what has been seen cannot be unseen. His hospital gown showed off a bit too much. Pulling the closet door open, he pulled his slacks from a plastic bag in the bottom. From the pocket, he pulled his wallet. Next, he searched until he found his credit card. Here, he thrust it into Pam's hands. Take this and buy her something. Something wonderful for a wonderful little girl, like a car or maybe a diamond ring. I think she's only 10. A car might be a bit much. You're a girl. Think of something and get it for her. Tell her, I'm sorry. I'm a sorry person. I'm a heel. Tell her I am going to change. I'm going to become a monk and live in a cave on the side of a mountain. someplace cold and wet. Monks don't do that anymore. Maybe you could try just being a nicer person. Pam didn't know any monks, but she was pretty sure that they lived in buildings these days. I can't work at that car place anymore. Cheating people out of their hard earned cash for pieces of junk that shouldn't even be on the road. Pam looked closer at Mr. Slam Chunks and realized that he was the one who had sold her that Chevy Malibu. It wasn't that bad. I've got to get out of here so I can begin my new life. He grabbed the plastic bag from the closet, stuffed his slacks back in, and headed for the door. Mr. Slam Chunks, you should put those pants on. It was too late. He was out the door and down the corridor. Pam sat there unsure of what was going on. Is this monster really a bad thing? Pam walked out to the reception desk and asked to borrow a phone. She called her mother first to tell her where she was, and then she called the school to explain why she had missed the last 4 classes. Paula pulled up out front of the hospital, and Pam jumped in. Is your friend okay? Pam told her mother who it actually was that she'd been in the ER with. Oh, well, she got what she deserves then. It's kind of weird how all these people being swallowed by this monster are turning into really nice folks. They drove over to the school so Paula could explain away any problems at the front office, and then Pam could get her vehicle. I imagine you're going to go to the office now. Paula looked at Pam. Well, this case is really weird, and I have that book to see about, and all those police reports, and go have fun. Just be careful and be home in time for dinner. Pam arrived at the office, intent on doing what needed doing and then getting home. These are for you, and there's some woman waiting to see you. Hilda held out a stack of phone messages as thick as a brick. She was reading a magazine called Snipers Make Good Neighbors. Pam grabbed the messages and looked over at a woman sitting in the waiting area. Uh, how might we help you here at the Bag Company? My name is Gertrude Katzbox. I have a much needed talent that I think you folks might be interested in. She had on an oversized house coat, and from one of the pockets she pulled a cat. Well, a kitten. I do cat therapy. Her hair had 2 curlers, both on the same side. Pam looked at the kitten and then at Gertrude. Cat therapy on cats or on people? People, of course. The cats are the mechanism by which the therapy is done. She held out the kitten. Here, feel this. Can you feel the relaxation just spreading through your body? The kitten purred. Pam had to admit she did feel a bit more relaxed. Come with me. I need to fill out some forms and see about maybe putting you in somewhere. Pam led the way to the coffee shop. All the forms Susie had generated to make the bag company more efficient and run more smoothly, which had fallen into the basement, were now neatly filed behind the coffee bar. Pam got busy filling out the paperwork needed to get Gertrude processed in. How many cats do you have? Pam scratched out working hardware and penciled in cats. Let's see, there's John and Donna, Bob, Mark, Lily, Billy, Donnie, Frank, Brenda, Harry. Eddie fixed Pam her usual. Once she had finished, he grabbed her cup and refilled it. Marty, Linda, and Donald. Gertrude sipped her cup. Now, those are just the inside cats. Her house shoes didn't match. Prince Wapo came strolling in. He made a beeline for the kitten, who was playing with Wanda's earring. Someone, in a bid to decorate the library for Halloween, had put a witch's hat on Wanda's head. It looked very convincing. The prince jumped up onto the counter and he eyeballed the kitten. He then turned and looked at Pam. He gave her a cold stare. Barbara came strolling in. Have you guys seen that weird cloud on the horizon? No, does it look like a rainstorm? Eddie walked around the end of the counter and went to have a look. The staff that had been taking a break all walked out to the front yard parking lot to have a look. I was coming back from a ghost checkup at the grocery store and saw that, she pointed to the west, and I thought it looks bad. The horizon had a black cloud sitting just outside of town. Wow, it does look kind of out of place. Pam wished there was some kind of an electronic device that worked around the bag office so they could check the weather reports. Eddie looked around the sky. Sky's not green, so we shouldn't have any tornadoes. It's kind of small, so I wouldn't worry. Cassandra headed back in to see about her next appointment. Pam assigned Gertrude to room 3F. She hoped Hortense liked cats. She filed away all the paperwork, hoping she had it in the right order. Now let's go see your new office. She led Gertrude upstairs. The office was pretty much like any other in the building, a room 15 feet by 20 with windows at one end. With a lot of work, one could be opened an inch. I'll get Grandy Sear to come see about getting them to open. He's our maintenance man. The room had a desk, a couple of chairs, and a bed. If you don't want the bed, I'll get Grandy to haul it off. A dozen used coffee cups were set on the shelves. Oh no, this will be perfect for therapy. Gertrude set the kitten down in the middle of the mattress and it got busy looking around. If you need anything else, just get with Hildy, set up your schedule so we'll know when to set your appointments. It's not that Pam would hire anyone who walked in off the street. It was more like anyone with an out of the ordinary talent was to be snatched up quickly before they wandered away and never came back. It was more like renting out office space for a percentage of their profits. Pam got back to the coffee bar just as Hildy walked in, followed by Mr. Unimportant. Someone here to see you. She then turned and walked back to her desk. Mr. Unimportant, we found the book. I have it here for you. She'd had a hard time getting it away from Sharma. Do you or any of your associates understand what it's about? I'm not at liberty to say. My patrons have expressed a wish to keep all information confidential. The staff had all wandered into the library coffee shop, each with their own pre manufactured excuse as to why they had to be there. Some grabbed books at random, which they pretended to peruse while listening in. Others got busy writing notes of interesting things needed inquiring into. Everyone was standing at the bar to perform their tasks. Well, I have your book, and it was a bit expensive. Pam pulled the invoice from her back pocket. She smoothed it out on the counter. She then nodded to Eddie, who pulled the book from under the shelf. One of my associates told me this might be an ancient joke book, Pam tried to explain. Mr. Unimportant just looked at Pam as if to say, Child, you know nothing. He checked the invoice. Reached into his coat pocket, he extracted an envelope. He pulled out nearly half of the contents and then handed the rest to Pam. We really thought it would cost more, but since you've done such remarkable work, we will definitely recommend your services to our friends. Mr. Unimportant hefted the book and walked out the door. I wonder if they know what that book is really about. Pam wondered if she would ever find out as well. Hildy came running through the coffee bar and rounded the corner. She ducked down behind it before saying, The cops are here. Are there a lot of them? Yes, and they look nasty. Hildy was peeking from around the edge of the counter. What did you do? Pam walked out to the reception desk and looked at a dozen or so officers. They were all young recruits. I was hoping there'd be more of you, but this will have to do. Follow me. She led the uniformed officers downstairs to recover all of their missing person files. Things were looking up for Pam. She had gotten all the missing person files out of the basement and out the door. Well, at least the ones belonging to the police department. Now, if she could just get the sheriff's department and the DPS to come soon, she'd have this one out of her hair. Yes, it was looking as if fortune were smiling on her at last. To make matters even better, she was home before dark. As Pam was drying the dishes and putting them away, she heard her dad in the living room watching the news. People have reported this strange looking cloud formation to the west of town. When the authorities were contacted, the Air Force stated that it was nothing but a weather balloon. And now for this from our live on the scene report on Gotterdamerung Street. Pam slipped into the living room to see what was going on. The police were called to an altercation this afternoon at the Shady Deal Apartments this afternoon to deal with a family dispute which started this afternoon. In the background was what looked like a smoldering remains of a building. 17 people were hospitalized and 28 are in jail tonight. The reporter walked to his right and the camera picked up more ruined structures. Someone living in the Shady Deal Apartments apparently was in possession of a large arsenal. Oh no, I have to run to the office. Pam opened the front door. She then closed it and went to look for her jacket. It was getting cold out. Paula looked at Al and then said, "Don't stay out too long. This is a school night. Don't you have homework?" No, ma'am, I don't think so. I wasn't there for any of my classes, remember? Pam ran to her pickup and jumped behind the wheel. She had to take several deep breaths to try to calm down so she wouldn't drive 100 miles an hour. Why is it when you're in a hurry, nobody else is? Traffic was a nightmare. Pam saw what looked like a demon standing on a street corner and nearly ran him over before realizing it was just some guy in a costume. She wound her way through vehicles that were all going the same direction but at a greatly reduced rate of speed. Pulling up out front, Pam nearly fell from the door as she got out of her truck without undoing the seat belt. It took her too much work to get the belt unhooked. She tripped over a cornstalk and landed hard on a garden gnome. Stumbling up the steps, she grabbed the doorknob and pushed. The door was stuck shut. What the heck? This door's never shut. She was about to kick the door when it swung inwards on its own. The yard goat stuck his head out from the room off the hall and said, "Hey." Pam just waved in acknowledgement and ran for the door to the basement. The lights were off. Pam felt around the wall trying to find the light switch. She found a large spider instead, which quickly vanished up her sleeve. Out, out, out! She swung her arm, trying to dislodge the spider, and wound up hitting the light switch. The light did little to illuminate the long staircase. Pam did her best to walk slowly down the stairs. At the bottom, she looked at the door with a rope stretched across it. Mr. Armstrong said this would keep anyone out. She took a step closer. What was he thinking? She took the next step and tried to look into the darkened room. She put one hand on the rope and leaned into the office. Still can't see any missing weapons. As she felt along the wall until her fingers felt the switch. She flicked it up. The room sprang into life. Guns lined every surface. Pam looked for any empty spots, but there were none. All the ammo boxes were stacked neatly along the wall. All the rifle racks held rifles. If Susie didn't take any of Mr. Armstrong's guns, then where did she get them? You're assuming that Susie or Bonnie took them, and you're also assuming she was the one responsible for all that carnage. Why did the voice Pam considered to be her conscience sound so much like her mother? With shaking legs, Pam shut off the lights and went back upstairs. She needed to sit down, but she also needed to call Susie first. Should she call? Should she just be happy that Mr. Armstrong's weapons were still safe and sound and leave it at that? Pam walked out to the parking lot, sat behind the wheel of her pickup. She looked at her cell phone. Time to flip another coin. She did the mental coin flip, but called Susie before the coin had a chance to stop spinning. The phone rang a few times, and then it was picked up. Hello, Susie? Are you there? Or is this Mrs. Hatchett, maybe? A whisper came over the line. Pam, am I glad to hear from you? It's like World War IV around here. The voice sounded like Dorothy, the only sane one inside her head. Is everything all right? Did Susie or Bonnie start any of this? No, it was Cindy. She came home again and started nagging about the lack of privacy around here. Oh, Pam didn't know anything about Cindy. Someone new, or maybe someone old who had been drugged into submission. Uh, er, is there anything I can do to help? Pam had all of her fingers crossed. Nah, I think things will calm down once the smoke clears. Is it bad? Nah, just somebody burned dinner. Pam took a deep breath. Is that y'all's apartment complex on the news, the one that's burning to the ground? Oh no, that's down the street. Pam nearly passed out with relief. Thank God. I thought, well, when I heard the news, I wouldn't blame you for thinking any kind of a major altercation around here didn't involve this bunch of wackos. Pam did the whole thing, take care and stay in touch that most folks did to end a conversation. She felt too weak to drive back home. With trembling hands and a stomach that wanted to come up and visit, Pam got her truck in gear and headed home. Chapter 8. Not a good idea. Pam was surprisingly relaxed all day in school. Nothing blew up and nobody tried to set anything on fire. There were no tests, and none of the teachers found any reason to give Pam even a hard look. It wasn't until lunchtime, when she strolled outside to have her sandwich under a tree, that she looked up at that weird looking cloud and wondered, what the heck is up with that cloud? It hung there on the horizon, kind of like how a brick doesn't. It was so black it almost looked as if it were sucking the life out of the sky. The Air Force had said it was just a weather balloon, and so nobody paid it the least bit of attention. I think maybe I should ask somebody to have a look just to be on the safe side, but who? Pam got her cell phone out and looked at her contact list. Barbara was the only one at the office who was an investigator and wasn't tied up on some long term assignment. She hit the call button to the office. As she listened to the phone ring at the other end, Pam wondered what Barbara's last name was. Nobody seemed to know, and any time the subject was brought up, Hildy answered, Hello, thank you for calling the bag office. How might I direct your call? She almost sounded nice. Hildy, it's me, Pam. Pam Bogus? Yes, her. I need to speak to Barbara. Oh, well, let me just run around the building trying to track her down. The handset went thump on the desk. Pam had enough time to wonder what Barbara's last name was and why nobody could remember it and how come nobody ever went to the effort to find out. Barbara answered the phone. Barbara, this is Pam. I'm sitting here looking at that weird cloud, wondering if maybe somebody shouldn't go have a look. Let me check my calendar. Nope, nothing right now. You want me to go see what it might be? Barbara had been sitting at the coffee bar looking at a catalog full of ghost hunting gear. Yes, but do you think you might want to take somebody with you, just in case? Even the seemingly safe investigations had proven to be somewhat hostile. Let me ask if anybody wants to go. Barbara looked through the door to the library in the approximate direction of Hortense, who had been thumbing through a snow globe catalog. Mikey Baba Ganoush had been sitting on the floor in one of his yogi positions. Carol Munchausen was asleep after having a vexing session with a herd of sheep who were upset over something that had happened at work. George was playing chess with Bruce Wallace, but neither had moved in over an hour. They both had their eyes closed in concentration. Anybody want to go look at clouds? She yelled through the door. I'll go. It sounds like fun. Madame Dingus grabbed a to go cup and came running out. It looks like Angie will be going with me. Barbara was afraid this nice streak was going to end just about the time everybody relaxed. Great. Go have a look, but don't do anything dangerous or hazardous or unsafe or chancy or perilous or dangerous or risky. Pam didn't want anything happening to her friends, even though they were all adults and had faced dangers before. Pam was worried she was becoming her own mother. Hey, how dangerous can a cloud be? Barbara thought about tornadoes and hurricanes and thunderstorms. Don't answer that. Pam put her cell phone back in her book bag and stared up at the cloud. It looked black and menacing, but it hadn't moved since yesterday. Maybe it's nothing. She headed for her next class. Pam pulled a mixing bowl out from under the drill press and looked for the flour. Here, you can have some of mine. Jackie Springhill held out a 10-pound bag with a King Arthur printed on it. The school bought only discount flour from the flea market. Ah, uh, gee, thanks. Pam was about to lift the bag up to the bowl. Here, let me do that for you. Jackie lifted the bag up onto the counter and began measuring out precisely the amount called for in the recipe. Uh, thanks, I can. Pam watched as Jackie began mixing in all the required ingredients. Shouldn't I do? Oh no, you just relax while I do this little something for you. Jackie was furiously mixing and kneading and smashing the mix into baking pans. Mrs. Sandtiger looked at the fresh, hot, steaming muffin as if it might bite. You, she indicated Pam, made these? Before Pam could reply in the negative, Jackie jumped in. Yes, ma'am, she did all the work and she made these for her part in the Halloween bake sale. Miss Sandtiger took one tiny little bite. She fully expected the thing to be either hard as a rock or poisonous or both. Wow, this is. She stuffed the muffin into her mouth. Very tasty. She got busy licking her fingers of every speck. Pam walked out to her truck with both arms filled with bags. Jackie had insisted. I'm so sorry about saying things about the way you were dressed. Not that there's anything wrong with your outfits. It's just that, well, I couldn't help noticing you had some patches and things on your clothes. Then she shoved several bags into Pam's arms. Here, I bought you a few things. You didn't have to. Yes, I do. I would carry these out to your truck for you, but I promised Kathy I would help her with her math. Kathy was number 2 when it came to bullying. Then I have to find that girl with the braces and help her with her English. That was number 3. The girls who had all hung out with Jackie had found her new attitude just a bit disturbing, and they'd found somebody less saccharine to hang out with. I guess that trip through the monster's digestive tract was a good thing. Pam got to wondering what the monster really was. Pam punched in the number and then listened to the phone ring. After a few minutes, it was answered. Pam told the officer she needed to speak to Lieutenant Mark Slot. After a few more minutes, a voice came on. Bogus, you called? Yes, sir. See, I was thinking, you know that monster that's been eating people? Has anybody else been attacked lately? Not that I'm aware of. Well, it's just that I think the monster's doing a good thing because everybody it eats comes out a better person. Hmm, interesting. He made thinking noises. Nope, can't have a monster running around eating people even if it's good for them. It's against the law. Which law? The one that says you can't run around eating people. What will the city do if for some unknown reason we can't catch it? The mayor is already considering calling in the National Guard and doing a house to house search. Won't that upset a few people? Yeah, just about the entire city, but have you ever tried to reason with that clown? He made a "you didn't hear me just say that, right?" sound. Pam made a "heard what" kind of sound. Look, I understand where you're coming from, but the law is the law. Either catch this thing or we're going to live through some disturbing times. I'll do my best then. She did the whole coming to an end of a conversation and hit the end button. Pam stopped her pickup and tried to look inconspicuous as she watched the side door of the IRS office. A sign said employee parking only. She wasn't sure that mean folks worked here, but everybody seemed to think this place was the home of the spawn of Satan. Now, if Mr. Monster will just come for a snack, she tried to get comfortable. Pam had her history book out and propped up on the steering wheel. She tried to watch the door and read at the same time. It was a good thing the chapter was boring, so she didn't get so wrapped up in it that the sound of the door bursting open was missed. She looked up just in time to see the monster, over 6 feet tall, nearly as wide, come squeezing out the door like a cork from a bottle. It spit a shoe out of its mouth, turned, and began running. Security guard came running out the door, and he stopped at the edge of the parking lot. The look on his face said, "They don't pay me enough to chase that thing." Pam hit the gas and went after this scampering, jiggling beast. It loped along at a steady pace. It seemed to be unaware or unconcerned that Pam was following. Traffic did its best to get out of its way. Only a patrol car was interested in the thing. The lights went on and the vehicle began to gain on the creature. As the police car pulled alongside Pam, the officer on the passenger side looked at her. She tapped her partner on the arm and pointed to Pam. The light went out. The car slowed down and took a corner and was gone. What was it I said about not doing anything dangerous? Pam wished she had Sarah with her. Sarah was turning out to be quite a fighter. The monster continued running along without a care in the world. Pam looked close and could have sworn it looked like it was slowing down. It stopped and shook from head to foot. It opened its mouth wide and then, with a mighty heave, it spewed out a man in a suit. The man hit the pavement and lay there. The monster shook some more, and once again it coughed up a government employee. This one looked female. Now, with less food in its belly, the monster began running again, this time faster and with more vigor. Pam stopped next to the two bodies. Neither one was moving. Oh man, now what? This had not been a part of her plan. Pam jumped out and went to see about the pair. She checked to be sure they were both breathing, and then she got her arms under the man's shoulders and heaved. She got him up and onto his feet, just barely. Monster spit dripped down from every part of him. Pam managed to get most of it on herself. Using the strength born of desperation, Pam got him up and over the rear of her truck and dumped him into the bed. Her shirt was a total mess. She quickly did the same with the woman, unceremoniously dumping her on top of her coworker. This added a lot of goo to her already messed up outfit. Running back to the driver's seat, she got going once more, looking for signs of the monster. It was nowhere to be seen. Pam drove to the end of the block and looked both ways. A man who had been walking his dog was now trying to coax it down from a tree. Did a monster just come by this way? The man just pointed down the street. Thank you. Pam hit the gas. At the end of the street, Pam spotted her quarry as it turned a corner and kept going. She drove as fast as she could without spilling her passengers from the rear of her truck. I should have put the tailgate up. Her hands were sticky on the wheel. The neighborhood was becoming less than desirable. It was going from HGTV to Sci Fi Channel at a rapid rate. The houses were mixed in with businesses, and they were getting close to the university. Most of the houses had been converted to apartments or simply left to convert back to nature. Right on the edge of the university, the monster turned into a driveway and ran behind a building. Pam stopped near the last place she had seen her target. She jumped out and checked on her cargo. Well, they were both snoring in a puddle of monster goo, and that was dripping from the bed of her truck. You guys wait here. I'll be right back. I hope. She ran for the back of the building. The fence had been put up to keep people out, but somebody had not stayed out, and now the fence was broken in several places. It was now just a suggestion to stay out. She had her phone out and had dialed the police. Hello. Yes, ma'am. I'm on Big Brain Street and High Thoughts. Yes, it has something to do with that thing. Could you just come and keep an eye on my truck? No, ma'am. I won't ask them to do anything weird. Thank you. She hit the end button. Pam slipped the cell phone into her sweater pocket. She was glad it had some. Her uniform was devoid of pockets, and she looked around the corner with caution. The back door stood open as if trying to entice her to enter. So she did. What could possibly go wrong? Are you nuts? This is how horror movies begin. Run away! You guys, shut up. I need to listen. Pam was looking down a long corridor with doors on both sides. There was broken glass all over the floor. It crunched as she walked. Something creaked as boards were exposed to excessive weight. A door slowly swung shut. Pam moved to the swinging door and tried to listen for movement. The creaking was growing less with each footfall. This is not the smartest thing I've ever done, but it's not the dumbest either. She opened the door and slipped through. Stairs went down into the darkness. Now that you know where the thing is, why don't you just go back and call in the SWAT? 'Cause the police don't do paranormal, remember? She began to descend. The stairs were old and worn. Once she reached the bottom, she could see tables and chairs and what looked like old medical equipment piled on both sides of the exit. It looked like she was in some old abandoned university medical building. The hallway was piled high with things you'd expect to find in a sci fi horror movie. A trail was visible running through the dust and debris on the floor. The sound of a door slamming was followed by the sound of voices. Pam tried to catch what was being said, but it was just a mumbled noise at the end of the hallway. Well, the monster hasn't killed anyone, as far as we know. Shut up! I'm trying to bolster my courage. Pam tried to think happy thoughts as she walked towards the sound of voices. Your mother would have a fit if she knew where you are and what you're doing. Come on, guys, quiet. Make me feel guilty or scared or like the end of the world has arrived. But it has. A light could be seen under the door. Pam was just going to push it open just enough so she could hear better. The door swung inwards. A man stood in the opening. And with that, I'm going to call this episode done. I hope you enjoy it without the music. That's a thing I just have no control over. If you want me to put the music back in, let me know. If you could care less, let me know that as well. Until next episode, this is Chris James for Story Time. And then there'd be music here, but there isn't.